you are joining us here at TDS Towers in Hemel Hempstead for the continuation of Tenancy Deposit Protection Week 2017. And joining me again, Ben Beadle from TDS. And Ben, I think for this video today, I thought we would talk about the inventory, because I actually don't think that there's enough talk about inventories and how important they are. And again, setting up a tenancy correctly at the beginning with the inventory can save a lot of kind of heartache and stress later on down the line.
It can, and that's not just from the point of view of the dispute resolution service that we provide. Actually, the vast overwhelming number of tenancies end through agreement. So 99% of tenancies typically end without dispute or maybe begrudging agreement. But that inventory can be really, really helpful to enable those conversations to take place. You've got documented records, people know where they stand, there's no ambiguity about the condition of the property. If you haven't got that and it ends up at a dispute, it's really unlikely that a landlord is going to win anything from that deposit, because of course the adjudicator needs to see that the property is in a worse condition at the end than it was at the beginning. The onus is always on the landlord to show that they are entitled to some or all of the tenant's money. So if the landlord doesn't have that, they're not going to get it. It's as simple as that. So the money would be returned back to the tenant. But more importantly, the inventory is a really good way of showing the tenant that you mean business. You're conducting the tenancy in a way that is professional, and you're setting your stall out about what you expect. And I think that also helps oil the wheels, as it were, for the tenancy to take place in a really amicable way. It doesn't always work out like that, but if it does fall apart, at least you then have a clear condition statement about how the property was. And of course it's really important that the tenant is engaged as part of that inventory process. They can make comments, signing that document so that you've got contemporaneous notes and so forth from the start of the tenancy. All of that stuff is hugely important.
Absolutely agree. And if there is a dispute at the end of a tenancy, what is the kind of timescale for the landlord to revert back to the tenant and say, well, actually, I want to deduct A, B, C and D? Because we've had a question on Property Tribes that a landlord is just constantly delaying even giving the tenant that information to enable them to go to a dispute if they need to.
Well, that's obviously not quite cricket. That's not what we expect, and that's not what the law requires. So a tenant, if they want their deposit back, they're expecting it back, they should make a formal request to the landlord or the agent for its return. If it's not received after a period of 10 days and the deposit is protected in the insured back scheme, a tenant can raise a dispute with us. Now, it may well be slightly too early to raise a dispute. It depends on the circumstances. So if the property has been left poorly, it is reasonable that it will probably take slightly longer to get all of those bits and pieces together. But obviously, if the landlord is clearly frustrating the process, the onus is then on the tenant to take some action. They need to raise a dispute promptly, because there is a 3-month window within which to raise a dispute on the insured back scheme.
So what's the actual process then if a dispute needs to be raised?
Well, if a dispute needs to be raised, then first and foremost, comprehensive discussions with your landlord or letting agent, because as I said, 99% of tenancies end without dispute. So that's the way that things are normally settled, and we need people to properly engage in that process. If that has failed, the tenant can raise a dispute with us and notify us that they haven't got their money back. We will ask the landlord for their reasons and whether there's a dispute or not, and ask them to put evidence in. The landlord's got 10 working days to do that. At the expiry of that time frame, we will check it and see what the dispute is about, and we will then, if it's appropriate to do so, ask the tenant to comment on it so they know what's being claimed, and ask the tenant to put their evidence in. And at the expiry of that 10 working days, we will verify it and appoint an adjudicator to look at the evidence. They will then take a detailed look at what's been said and form a view on the balance of probabilities, who's the most likely to receive and be entitled to some or all of that deposit money. And then a final decision will be issued, the payments will be sent, and that will be that.
Oh, fantastic. And I think, again, we should reiterate the inventory would be such a useful tool for the landlord to have in the event that happens.
That's right, because otherwise you have no real measure about how the property was, and that's what the adjudicator will need to see. They will need to see that the property is in a far worse condition or a worse condition at the end to that of the beginning. And if you don't have those documents, you're not going to get very far.
No, indeed. And we often have questions about should the inventory be taken by a third party? Does it make it more credible if it is taken by a third party, or can landlords do their own inventory? But clearly, I know you've had some written on a scrap of paper and things like that. It's got to be a professional document, hasn't it?
It has. I mean, we're not going to reject landlord inventories out of hand. We will only reject them because they don't detail the quality and the information that a professional inventory would entail. And with all of these things, it's only as good as what you put in.
Yeah.
So I think best practice would be getting your agent or getting a third-party inventory provider to do that professionally for you. If a landlord fancies their chances at being able to replicate that, then good luck. But our experience is that probably an independent third-party provider is the way to go.
And photographs absolutely paramount.
Indeed, but embedded as part of that inventory. So don't have photographs on the side, and we don't need 500 photographs. We need a handful embedded in that document that reinforce what the inventory clerk is saying.
So just to summarise then, we would say that create the inventory at the beginning of the tenancy, preferably use a professional inventory clerk, and make sure that the tenant has a chance to look over it and sign it off that they agree that that's the starting point of the condition of the property at the beginning of the tenancy.
Absolutely right, and making it very clear that that's the benchmark for the deposit return, subject to any wear and tear. That's the document that's going to be used to determine how much of that deposit comes back.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for sharing those insights, and stay tuned for more from Tenancy Deposit Protection Week 2017 here on Property Tribes.